Southern Colonies, Religion and Politics. In all of the Southern Colonies, the Anglican Church was supported by taxes. So that meant that everyone was paying taxes to the Anglican Church in the Southern Colonies. And the Anglican Church was any church or offshoot of the Church of England. So when King Henry VIII came up with the Church of England and branched away from Catholicism and made a separate church that wasn't quite Protestant either, the Church of England became the Anglican Church. And so any offshoots or any churches that reported to or were subject to the Church of England were considered part of the Anglican Church as a whole. Anyone who wanted to enter politics would have to be a member of the church. Though the majority of the colonists were not. So if you wanted to get into politics, you had to be a member of the Anglican Church. Now, the majority of the colonists were not members of the church. They still had to pay their taxes to support the Anglican Church, but that didn't mean that they were members, that they went regularly, that they felt compelled to obey the rules of the Anglican Church. They didn't have any kind of ties to it. They just had become colonists. They lived in the Southern Colonies, but they hadn't lived in England. There were people that were second and third generation colonists. They had come from, their parents and grandparents had come from England, but they had not. So they didn't feel any ties to the Church of England like maybe future or past generations had. And so it wasn't as important to them to be involved with the Anglican Church. In general, the Southern Colonies had the greatest degree of religious toleration. So if you weren't a member of the Anglican Church, that was tolerated. That was okay. If you were Lutheran or Puritan or had some other religious belief, you weren't persecuted for that. If you were Catholic, you weren't persecuted for that. Anything that maybe would have been persecuted within England itself, you weren't so much persecuted for that in the Southern Colonies. There was more religious toleration there. Now, taxes were being paid to the Anglican Church, but you didn't have to be a member of the Anglican Church, and you didn't have to carry on with their beliefs. So there was still religious toleration here. Politics during this period were largely controlled by the planter aristocracy. So that you had those wealthy plantation owners, and they were the people who were primarily going to be controlling politics at this time. Each Southern colony had a governor chosen by the colony's English sponsor. So each colony that was started had a sponsor, either some joint stock company or it could be a royal colony, but someone was sponsoring it. Someone had said, we want to start this colony. So whoever was the spokesperson or the main sponsor would choose the governor of the colony. Then there was a governor's council and an assembly to represent the people. And that meant the common people, the actual people that were living there. Now, the government or the politics here were still largely controlled by the planter aristocracy, so these wealthy plantation owners could have made up a large part of the assemblies in each colony. During the 1700s, these assemblies took more and more power away from the governors. So remember, the governors are only put in place by these sponsors who are way over in England and don't really know how things are going on a day-to-day basis in the colonies. The people in the assemblies live in the colonies. They know what's going on, and so the assemblies were taking more and more power away and becoming more powerful than the governors who were put in place by people from England. These assemblies had a lot of the wealthy plantation owners within them. So Politics were still being controlled by this planter aristocracy. And in order to run for office, a man had to be a member of the Anglican Church. We talked about that up here. To enter politics, you had to be a member of the Anglican Church. So to run for office, like to run for being a member of the assembly, you would have to be a member of the Anglican Church. Now, many people, including Thomas Jefferson, would acquire membership in the church and then never set foot inside it again. So some people would go into the Anglican Church. They would say, we want to be a member. They'd become a member so that they could get involved in politics, and then there wasn't really any kind of requirement after that. Once they were a member, once they had already gotten involved in politics, there wasn't any going back and saying, that person's not a member anymore, he's out. So many people would acquire membership simply so that they could be involved in politics. So in the late 1600s, early 1700s, religion and politics were very closely related in the Southern colonies.